Good morning, everybody. I'm so thrilled. It's 5 after 11, and we actually have 7 at the table. So I am turning over this work session to our Budget Vice Chair, Janie Strauss, and I will be operating our 3-minute rule. So Janie, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you very much. What I'm proposing as a way to organize ourselves is to start our discussion with the follow-on motions. And I think I have asked staff to put that part of the document up. And I have to find it in my own. So, because I believe we've had this extensive discussion on the actual amendments. And so we will start with the follow-on motions, and we'll go one at a time, see if people have more questions, more information that they need, or wish to state a position or an opinion. So, Dr. Brabrand, any questions from you? Is that?
The only thing I would just say to you all, we're almost to the end on this process. We actually were able to scoot a little time on. This was not a time that we had planned weeks or months ago. We do have time Thursday. But the more that we can continue to just sort of pull out from the board consensus on what the priorities will be for the $6 million and change in our staffing initiatives that we had, we realized that with the follow-on motions and the proposed amendments, when combined, and you look at some of the follow-ons for costs for this budget, FY20's budget, you would have more in there than currently in the $6 million. So to the degree that in your conversation you can kind of pull out your priorities, and I would say we'll certainly want to work with you if it's just a nudge over $6 million and it's like, please, this is consensus for board priority. You know, we'll do our best as staff to try to work to arrange that. But I think that's the give and take of the budget process. And, you know, we have a fully funded budget, second year in a row, and we want to close on a positive note. But we want just a little more feedback from you to help us come up with the final package with Ms. Strauss and Ms. Derenak-Kofax as the budget co-chairs. So thank you, and we'll be glad to try to help with anything this morning.
Okay, Ms. Evans?
Are you, we're not having a presentation today, we're just having
Well,
this-
that's what I would like to sort of flesh this out a little bit more, and then we'll go back and take
Okay, well
names,
then put
okay?
me on, if you just put me on the list then.
Sure, okay, hold on a minute. And Ms. Corbett-Sanders is going to run our timer.
Megan.
And, okay, hold on a minute. So we have Evans, McLaughlin. Okay, so what we have on the screen are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 follow-ons. And I'm assuming that everybody has read all the information that staff has come back to us on those follow-ons. So I would love to go in order of the motions as they are in our document. Is everybody in agreement with that? Is that fine? Okay, and so the first one is Mr. Moon, Mr. McElveen. So if we have any, or do you have a question on process?
No, not on the question.
Okay.
Not on the process, but since you are about to call me on the very first one.
Yes, that's right.
I'm here.
I do have a question. of
Okay, yes,
process.
if there's a process question, go ahead. Sure.
So my process question on these follow-on motions is that virtually all of them are TBD. So I'm trying to understand, first of all, we've got the proposed school board amendments that are showing a cost of $6.6 million. And now we're going to talk about follow-on motions, and virtually all of them, you know, there's no cost that we know of right now. So I don't even know how we're going to spend time talking about something that we don't know what the cost is going to be, and how this then connects with our school board amendments.
Well, I guess it has been suggested to me, since we haven't had a chance to talk about this, if there are no questions on this, then we can go back to the amendments because there's also more information on the amendments. But since we have limited time, we'll do our very best to cover, but I've had some requests to look at the follow-ons, okay?
I appreciate that, Ms. Strauss. I guess what I'm trying to say is, if there isn't an estimated cost, then the discussions on these seem premature. And since we have another budget meeting, what I would suggest is, on this list, you do have a cost for the net change on the 2 nurses. And then you've got the instructional assistant salary. Those basically have 2 costs that are
Okay.
reasonable for us to do something
Okay.
with. Everything else, there's no cost, and until
Okay.
there's a cost, how can the board even
Well,
deliberate them?
Well,
Okay, so-
because there's things to say about them.
There are things to say. Okay, hold on.
I
because-
understand that, but
All right,
I'm
you
trying
want-
to be mindful of the fact that we have a budget that
Okay.
we're going to vote on in a couple weeks. We've got this today, and we've got something on Thursday. How are we going to talk about things where there's no dollar value?
Okay, well, because people wish to comment, but what you're suggesting is to make sure that we have enough time to go back and talk about the nurses, because there's an adjustment there, and I know we have a request to go back and talk about IAs because there's some question there.
Yes,
That's
and then
fine.
how they're going to tie into the amendments,
Sure.
because I feel like we've been having this conversation that the amendments at the 6.6, even though they were brought forward in February, I don't know that that's considered that, oh, these are automatic and this is how we're going to vote to support them.
Not necessarily,
Ms.
okay.
McLaughlin, that's precisely why we are talking about the follow-on now, because there was a misunderstanding by some that as they put things forward, it was a follow-on so they could get additional information to be able to put in an amendment. Others just went ahead and put in an amendment without necessarily, or having had more information, because some of us were waiting for information as part of our budget questions. And so today's focus, and now we're down to an hour and 20 minutes, and we are going to cut off promptly at 12:30, is just to have an initial discussion about these follow-on motions as well. Okay?
All right, so let us begin, and if we are succinct, we will cover everybody's needs. So, Mr. Moon, do you have anything else that you needed to know or say?
There's nothing more to add from the last work session that,
Okay.
as you can see, that mine does not have
Right.
a impact upon FY20 budget,
Okay.
but it's going to have impact in the following
Okay.
subsequent years. So
Okay.
I need to work with the staff to come up with a comprehensive language.
Okay, fine, all right, so no other questions or issues on that, all right?
So is that going to be a follow-on motion to the budget?
Yes, that's going to be a follow-on motion to the budget.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, the next follow-on is Ms. Keys-Gamarra, who is not here, so maybe we'll go on unless there is a question on that one.
I can address that briefly, because this is one that both Ms. Keys-Gamarra and I worked on. The issue is that with we need a multi-year plan for Title I, especially in light of the threshold for Title I moving up to 55%. And we know about the tipping study being at 40%. There's that gap. And so what she is asking for, as am I, is what do we need to do to ensure that those schools that have students that are,
Right, that would be affected.
Right.
Okay, all right. So the intent is for that follow-on to stay, as far as we know now, even though there is no money at the moment.
it'll be a follow-on motion.
Thank you. All right, the third is in Evans and McLaughlin. Any other questions?
Yes, I wanted to talk about this a little bit. I want to say, first of all, how pleased I am with the direction, Dr. Brabrand, that you and Dr. Duran are going in with this. And I do hope that the board agrees with that. I don't know if this is the time or the place to get basic consensus on it, but I certainly agree with the per pupil allocation approach to dealing with the equity issues, the substantial equity issues that we have. As I mentioned before in a work session, I was hoping to find something that we could do this year or in fiscal '20 to get the ball rolling. And one of the things that I've been pondering, at least, is the idea of doing something for the middle school after-school programs, where we have some very robust programs at some of our schools and not so much at some others, particularly our high-poverty schools. So I did put in a budget question after talking to some colleagues and some principals. I put in a budget amendment about adding one bus a week. Now, that's not necessarily what's going to do the trick, I don't know, but I figured at least I would get the answer to that question is, what would it cost for us to add one bus a week, so there would be transportation another day a week. Again, I don't know if that's something that would be desired by the high poverty middle schools, if that would be useful. That would require more conversation. So as I was I wanted to let my colleagues know, I don't think the answers to those questions will be finished by the time we do this budget. So what I am contemplating potentially is for having something by the time we get to year end. Again, it keeps, and Ms. Burden, I guess my question here is, I did just put this in over the weekend. Is that a figure that you can get to me by the time we have our work session at the end? Is it Thursday we have our work session? Thursday. I thought that this would probably be a fairly simple equation, since it's one bus for the middle schools over.
Well, that's been passed on to the department to provide a response. My understanding is it is not it's not an easy calculation, and Mr. Plattenberg, I think, wants to.
Mr. Platt?
Be happy. Once we receive that request, we forward it on. Francine and I have already spoken about it. We're trying to make sure that we provide you something as rapidly as possible, but without making it a little more involved. And our fear was, so if there's any clarification that you might want to provide us, please do, so we don't overthink it. That'd be,
So it would basically, at least if, I looked at the FRM, so I did it at 40% poverty or more. I believe that's 8 middle schools. And so if you added one after-school bus a week, so that's not any, I guess I thought that would be an easy equation to do.
yeah, the broader terms of one school bus for every one of those 8 is a relatively simple mathematical equation, absolutely. It is then the distribution of the delivery of the students that you may choose to have at which point. So it becomes the logistics of asking for those clarifying points as to where you would take them. Would it be, and just some of those elements, but we're trying to go ahead and give you something as quickly as possible, so you have a
Okay.
general idea.
Okay.
And then if additional questions come.
Yeah, I think something in the ballpark would be helpful. Yeah, okay. So I'm working on that, and Dr. Brabrand, did you have a?
I would just say, Jeff, one thing maybe as we're doing this, because this was one, I think, the board can tell me, but I think this is right. This is one of the budget cuts that happened in the last several years, was the pulling back of transportation after school across the entire division. Isn't that right? Wasn't that a budget cut during some of those years? So we might, Jeff, as we get this, just recant for the board, what's the total for the entire system? Because we had a day in high school, right? I mean, what's it for high school? What's it for middle school? And then we can divvy it down to smaller numbers of schools, whether it's FRM or region. Do you know what I mean? Because the cost doesn't change because of the FRM of the school. It's based on the number of schools to provide bus transportation.
Well, and I think it would be helpful too, just to say what we do now. What do we provide in terms of buses?
Yeah, and that's what we asked. We ended up, because of the budget cuts, we gave schools the opportunity to make individual choices on which days that we had more ridership.
Okay.
And so some schools would then go ahead and choose one versus whatever the allotment was.
I see.
So, but I'll be able to
So
give
that's
you
one
more
reason it's
definitive answers to,
Okay.
yes.
All right, and just to finish up then, whether that's the approach that I would suggest taking, or possibly providing more flexibility. There might be some schools that could use the same amount of money, but use it to do something else, provide another program. So that's what I'm playing with, but I don't think it'll be ready until year end. And because it would be 1 year, year end would be appropriate, because by the second year, fiscal '21, we'll have a comprehensive plan.
Okay, so from your takeaway is this is not likely to be ready for the budget. It may be at year end, so you're waiting for more information.
It's not likely to be ready. At most, it would be some sort of a follow-on to, indicate where I was heading with
Okay.
it, but it wouldn't be a dollar amount for this,
Okay.
but I don't anticipate
Great,
that.
thank you. Okay, Mr. Moon, did you have?
So I just wanted to add to what Sandy had said, since she and I were sponsoring this follow-on. Dr. Brabrand, I'm trying to just understand, when we did this follow-on in early February as part of the budget vote, it said that we wanted to have recommendations by May 1st of this year. So I'm reading the response, which basically says, we're going to go ahead and try and do some sort of working group on this and have something ready for a year from now. To my colleagues, I just want to say, I understand that, but it is a little disappointing that it's been 3 months since we, as the board, said this was something we wanted to know about. And I'm just trying to get a better understanding of this response to me didn't really honor what Ms. Evans and I were asking for. And so I would have appreciated a little more dialogue from your team to just say to Ms. Evans and I that, you know, we apologize. Yes, we've had 3 months to try and tell you something about this. And as someone who served on the Turf Task Force, I mean, I know that, you know, that took us 10 months. So I didn't expect you all to have deep answers within 3 months. But we certainly did, on the Turf Task Force, try to at least refine it. I feel like I have no idea what you and your leadership team think about this challenge. And so now I've got Ms. Evans coming up with an idea of adding an extra day of bus for after-school buses, and I certainly see the value there, but I think we're going to need to flesh that out. And so I guess I would have liked to have had just a little bit of guidance from your staff on this one in terms of recognizing the fact that we've got some real disparities between our schools that have significant support from the communities and the things that allows them to do, rather than just this 3 sentences here.
So that's a point well taken. Your analysis is spot on. This is what we discussed at LT, these other task force that are community facing around this issue of extracurricular activities and participation. We thought there was a big equity lens that we really wanted to get stakeholder involvement, and we didn't think we could turn it around in enough time for the budget. So we should have closed the loop better probably with you and Sandy, and I apologize for that. But the spirit of it is we want to come up with something. We've never done a per pupil. We've had per pupil for textbooks since time began. We've never done a per pupil for this, and we want to make sure whatever we're proposing has input from a variety of stakeholders. And we just didn't think we could get it done in the format that we thought the board would want it to be. So we should have closed the loop, and as I said, I'll take responsibility for that.
Well,
But we do want to come, and we do plan to come with a plan that could really be developed in the FY21 budget about what that per pupil could look like and what factors should go into determining what the amount would be per school.
I appreciate that. I will just also add, though, that as the board member who did serve on that task force, I wish you and your staff had come and talked to me about this idea of how you want to execute on our follow-on, because I will tell you right now, I'm concerned about the approach you want to take, in the sense that the synthetic turf task force was very specific. It took us 10 months to figure out how to fund a very specific one, item project. If you put together a task force, and I'm not sure who you've thought about, again, I would have preferred Ms. Evans and I at least been consulted with where you are thinking on that, and we'll request support from the board that you work with us on how you want to execute on our follow-on motion. But it can't be this broad when you're going to bring in, staff has got to create some sort of at least structure to what this is going to be, because when you bring in a large variety of stakeholders, if there isn't a clear mission, it will be very challenging.
Okay, I have Mr. Moon, then going back to Ms. Evans. Is that okay? All right, so Mr. Moon?
Okay, thank you. In principle, that I am with Ms. Evans on this follow-on motion on, supporting after-school activities, whether it's a school bus, bus or some other ways to support the program, and also doing it from the year end. One area I may have different thoughts is limiting it to 40% of FRM or above. If it is only 8 schools with a 40%, I may want to go beyond that. So obviously, we need to know the cost implication of that. So when staff comes back with a response to her budget questions about 40%, if it could also include something even less than 40%.
You know, what I could do, Jeff, what I'm thinking is if we can come up with an amount for all high schools, for all middle schools, and then we can do a breakdown by FRM for those middle and high schools. And again, we'll work through the data and see what's possible, but that would be the idea.
Thank you. I guess this follow-on motion is being proposed by both Ms. Evans and Mrs. McLaughlin. But Sandy and I also had some discussion regarding particularly providing after-school activity, additional activity buses.
Okay.
Mr. Plattenberg, did you have something else you wanted to add to that, or?
Well,
Okay.
for the clarification that was provided, I'll provide a broader answer sometime tomorrow. I'll get an answer for the additional details and additional broader perspective and the context. That'll take a little bit more time.
Okay.
So, I
Thank
mean, if, I think, I'm trying to figure out, Dr. Brabrand, I know Mr. Moon and Ms. Evans and so forth, as many others have spoken about it. It'd be nice if I'd like to know what you really want now, because I'm confused.
So
I'm trying to
Jeff,
say I'm
can't we
confused,
calculate the
basically.
cost of transportation for an additional day per school? And that's a unit cost times however many middle schools,
Not
however
just
many
the
high
8,
schools?
not just the 8.
But I'm just saying, isn't the cost of, is the cost of transportation, is it different because the school has high FRM? It would be the same?
No, it's all
fixed unit?
distance. Yeah, it's time and distance, yes.
Right,
Yeah, and also the number of stops and the terrain.
right.
So
But
if
I'm
you think
saying,
about it logistically, it's.
because it was a cut some years ago, we may have average or overall costs for all middle and all schools when we cut those back. That could get a quick and dirty number to the board versus just the 8 specific FRM schools.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying?
I do, thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Ms. Evans, you wanted
So I also just, to follow up, I do think that this is something that's going to be quite significant, and we should do a work session on it. And I guess I would like to get some sort of a commitment about a work session in October, November. Is that enough time? I mean, it's going to have to be enough time, I think, if you're going to get it into the FY21 budget. So that I would ask for consensus on having a work session in the fall on this issue, because the board's going to have to deal with this.
So we have a next.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
so next step on that for a request for a report back on, I'm assuming what you're asking for, sort of the larger issue.
Well, and the plan.
And
you
the
know,
plan,
And the plan,
okay.
because we're, Dr. Brabrand's planning to come with us with a plan. And perhaps November would be the time for that.
Okay,
Um,
that's
so-
fine,
so
because there
let's-
was a, right.
Yeah, so let's talk about in fact, I would say, let's just do it in November, then that gives us December to ponder it a bit
Okay.
more before this
Right,
board
and
ends.
so that becomes the next step, okay? Thank you. All right, our next follow-on question is from, okay, we're done with that, is from Ms. McLaughlin. And I guess, Ms. McLaughlin, do you have any other follow-up information or questions on that, or if anybody else has any other comments on that?
No, I just, very hopeful that my colleagues, when they look at the information that Superintendent and his team have provided, that the tremendous benefit of having a school nurse in our 2 community schools will be incredible value add, and will also allow the division to get a better understanding of the increases in services that and opportunities for our students in these community schools to have access to a school nurse. So I'm hopeful for the very small nominal amount of $107,000 to have 2 school nurses versus 2 clinic aides that will be moved over and put in as part of the formal budget amendments that we're directing out of the $6 million.
Okay, thank you, and I think Ms. Schultz, you had a question on this one, a comment?
I'm just trying to find out, are we asking questions by topic or?
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
then
I'm sorry.
put me
so
on
you
the
came in-
list
Yeah,
for
just to
later.
organize, and then we'll go back to the other amendments, the actual amendments that people have put in, because there may be other questions, but we're just trying to answer.
No,
these
but
questions.
when, at the follow-ons, I would speak about potential additional follow-on.
Yes, that's fine, that's fine. Okay, so the next one is another one by Ms. Evans. If you have any questions or people have further comments.
I do. We discussed this at length, and I am still concerned, I'm still very concerned about where these 188 positions are going under the new staffing formula. And we're planning to have a work session on it, but the work session presumably will be after the budget's passed. So I'm trying to figure out how we deal with the fact that we're supposed to be approving a new formula. At the same time, we haven't had the work session, a follow-on work session on what's being proposed. So it does give me great concern. Of the 188 new positions, most of them are going to our wealthiest schools. They just are. And very, very few to our high-poverty schools, and that gives me great concern. So I'm kind of stumped, frankly, on how we are going to pass this budget with a formula that I believe needs revision. So, and when is our work session on the formula going to be, Madam Chair? Do we know?
We haven't scheduled it yet because we're still waiting for information from superintendent and staff. We can certainly put it on the agenda for Wednesday's chairs, and we can figure out when we can do it,
Okay.
depending on the availability of the information.
But at the same time, we're being asked by our vote on the budget to approve this formula, the new formula, and I have great concerns about that, so I don't know what to do about that.
Dr. Brabrand?
I think this is just the best way, first of all, I respect your point of view. The formula, there were two small tweaks to the formula, to the issue of the formula itself, going from, we had moved it up to 25% when we expanded Project Momentum last year. We moved it back down to 20%. Which is what it was at for years and years. Check me, by the way, Lee, as I'm talking, if I'm getting it wrong. The other is we actually blended a little bit more for FRM at 50 or 60% in that formula. Again, Lee or Alice can correct me, but somewhere in that higher. We made two little slight tweaks to the substance of the formula. However, this would be my nugget. Fundamentally, the formula did not change the distribution of teachers to schools. What it did do is we moved that distribution up front into the spring as opposed to waiting until late August and September. And that's the biggest move that we made. So we made more change procedurally in the distribution of the positions than we did to substantively rewriting. We didn't change the class size caps. We didn't change that. The board decided that years ago. That's still in there. We didn't fundamentally change the FRM ratios. So that is a discussion, I think, as the board does one Fairfax and puts an equity lens on. We just, honestly, we didn't have time to do that. The biggest move with the formula was to provide the positions up front earlier in the process, which we weren't doing at elementary school, but we were for middle and high.
No, I understand that.
And so the more deeper thing of looking at equity in the allocations is something I welcome. We just didn't get to do it in this year's budget.
So I guess what I'm coming around, I mean, I do understand all of that, but it still concerns me that we are not providing more in this new formula for our high-need schools, that
Understood.
we're only providing for the low-poverty schools. And so I mean, I may work with my colleagues on a follow-on motion of some sort indicating that this is for this year. In fact, it's probably too late for us to really change it anyway, isn't it? I mean, without,
Well, we did the major staffing
you've already
allocations
done the
in
allocations.
April,
Right.
when, trying to, again,
right.
bring it
and-
earlier.
And no one wants to, pull the rug out from under any
Right.
school. So, and, I certainly don't want to do that. At the same time, I guess I would like to make it clear that we have more conversation to have on the staffing formula, and perhaps that will be another follow-on motion to indicate as much,
Okay.
but I'll have to just to say this is not the permanent formula. We need to have a lot of conversation on where we're heading with this.
And the other place, Ms. Evans, I agree with you. We have formulas in place that have been in place for 20 years we've never looked at. I mean, that's just true. It may be sad, but I'm telling you as a partner with you that it's true. And with a One Fairfax mission that this board approved and the Board of Supervisors, I think it's time that we do that. But we need to really unpack it and make sure we understand it. And I think that's your point, and make sure we know how it's going to affect in its distribution. But again, I mean, one here, the finance team dug deep and realized we weren't treating our elementary schools with the same upfront allocation of staff as we were our middle and high. That was the equity play in this formula more than anything else, was to give all of our elementary schools that staffing earlier up front. And I think the other issues about the actual distribution are things that we need to do, and we welcome engagement with the board on that as we move forward.
So I do have one next step on the, we got a chart with all of the elementary schools, and there's a lot of green on there, but one of the reasons there's a lot of green is that those where it was neutral were deemed green. And so I would ask that we just have a slightly different color coding, that we put a different color on those where it's a wash. Because I think that will give us a better picture. I mean, you look at it, it looks like everybody gains except a few, and so I would like to see that color-coded
Okay.
differently with those that lose, those that gain, and those that are
Okay.
neutral.
Thank you.
Okay, so that appears to be a next step. Okay, and I do acknowledge on that chart, it also shows hold harmless. Hold harmless. Which is in white on that, yeah. Okay. Ms. Corbett Sanders?
Yes, thank you. I just want to make a slight comment on this piece, which is that when we look at equity, first I want to thank staff for trying to be proactive with our elementary schools. I think that's a positive step. The challenge is that when we look at equity and the impact on our highest poverty needs, but we also, what I'd like to better understand, because we heard about it from the SEPTA community on Thursday night, a real concern on the staffing reserve and how it's being allocated front-ended with those schools that have significant numbers of students with disabilities. And so I would like to have as a next step another piece which says whether or not we have taken away from those schools that have either a high percentage of students with disabilities or a trend line where there are more students coming into those schools with disabilities at the same time that we are perhaps negatively impacting the staffing formula.
Okay, so that's another next step. Okay, I would like to comment myself on this because I have schools in all the buckets on this one. And first, I appreciate the schools that will be held harmless. I have several in that. I have some very high-need schools that benefit from the enriched staffing that we provide. But I also have to say that when we talk about equity for all, it means treating everybody with reasonable class sizes. And it's for the first time that I see upfront reasonable class sizes across all schools, and that's important. And in next steps with special education, that is important. And at least from part of our challenge in serving well all of our children with unusual needs, it is not necessarily tied to FRM. We have children with unusual needs in all of our schools. And so I think it's important that we dispel the expectation that somehow other factors that we look at in staffing may or may not have anything to do with the unusual needs of many of our children that may be in non-high FRM schools. So this is a welcome look at that as well. So, okay, Ms. Schultz, you have a
Yeah,
question?
I just, with regard to your statement that this is the first time that we have reasonable class sizes, on what do you make that?
I want to say, since we had to raise class size during the last
But
recession.
on what are you making the basis for the decision that we do in fact have reasonable class sizes?
I'm saying we have more reasonable class sizes.
Based on
because-
what?
Based on when you look at being able to allocate, when we put the caps in to try to keep all elementary class sizes at no larger than 28, 29. That when we look at allocating the resources up front.
But that doesn't work in first of all, that's not working in practice, and we don't have the list yet, to my knowledge, of all of the class sizes, so.
Right, you're looking at individual, right, okay.
Well, I mean, we have to be very cautious to state that we have reasonable class sizes, because I will tell you categorically, I do not in my district.
Okay.
And so I think it is premature and without being codified by any data to say that we have reasonable class sizes. I think that's a
All right, that's
dangerous
fine.
statement to
Well,
say.
It's a step in a positive direction to allocate enough teachers to at least meet our class size caps and to allocate it up front rather than waiting until September when we can't hire any more teachers. Okay? So anything, yes, Ms. McLaughlin on this issue?
Yes, on this issue. I've been fortunate to be able to have spring visits in the Braddock District, and I've been talking to some other school board colleagues as well who are having visits with their principals. And so I just think we're going to need some more information because, Ms. Evans, certainly I share your desire to make sure that our most vulnerable schools get the supports they need. But I do want to also share with our full board and Dr. Brabrand that we are still having very large class sizes across the division. And I know it's a challenge, but to what Ms. Schultz was saying, we're going to need to, I think, have a very broad view of what it looks like across each of the pyramids and get an understanding, because one of the things we are hearing from our teachers is, I hope you are also hearing in your STAC, Superintendent's Teacher Advisory Council, is that our class sizes are high, and what that means is workload for teachers. And so we are having some teachers who say they're getting burnt out, and it's hard to stay in the profession, so compensation doesn't become the only reason of whether people remain in the profession itself.
Thank you, Ms. McLaughlin. Equity means equity for everybody. Okay, the next is, number 6 is Ms. Corbett Sanders for a follow-on. Anything else on that one?
Yes, thank you. We did get additional information that if we had a 3-year approach to creating a more attractive salary scale and one that allows people who work in our schools with some of our most vulnerable populations, as well as in classrooms where at very early ages. So people impacting the daily instruction of our students, that it would require a $2.7 million investment each year for 3 years. I know that that is substantial. I will be working with staff to looking at what we can do in year one, given where we're at. But I really implore my colleagues, especially in light of what has come to light in the special ed community, the importance of the role of IAs, as well as knowing that IAs serve as substitute teachers on average of 20% of their time or 1 day a week, while the classroom teacher is out of the classroom for IEPs and other meetings, that you will support me in bringing this to fruition for our teachers, or for our IAs and PHAs. And so I'll leave it at that.
McLaughlin?
Yes, Dr. Brabrand, Ms. Corbett Sanders and I met with a collection of instructional assistants this past week for about 2 hours. And it was very powerful to hear their first-person stories about the work that they're doing as instructional assistants in our schools. They really aren't assistants. Many times they're giving direct instruction in the classroom, and they're working 40-hour weeks. in the building, and yet the salary pay, Ms. Corbett Sanders, I recall they were saying as low as 19 and capping out at 39. So many of them have bachelor's degrees and are being relied upon, again, as I noted, to provide direct instruction. So one of the things that I'm hoping for out of this effort that's been brought forward by Ms. Corbett Sanders is that we also do a very comprehensive benchmarking so that you and the leadership team, as well as this board, have a more clear understanding of how we're really using our instructional aides and PHAs in the classroom, and especially when it comes to direct instruction, because oftentimes the concern is whether or not they would get paid more if they were on a long-term sub compensation. And in fact, some did share with us sometimes that they've been called upon to be a long-term sub. And we just can't keep doing what we're doing in this field. I think part of what's happened here is there's an old world understanding of instructional assistants back when my children were in elementary school, and it was a lot of sort of floating in and out and helping. But as the school division has grown in need and diverse instructional need, there is a lot of differentiated instruction in the classroom. So they're acting as second teachers oftentimes, and we can't keep compensating them in what we're doing.
Ms. Evans?
Yes, thank you, and thank you, Ms. Corbett Sanders, for bringing this issue forward. I do support improving the pay for IAs. One question, do all of our IAs get full benefits? They do, already, good. So my question then is to Ms. Corbett Sanders, what exactly you're planning to bring as an amendment, if you know yet?
Thank you, Ms. Evans. I'm actually still working on it. We just got the number of 2.7 million as being the initial investment, and I will be working with my colleagues and with staff to determine where, whether we can find a full 2.7 or if we have to moderate it and have a commitment to investing a larger scale next year. I brought this initially back in January because it was an area of great concern. I had raised it last year regarding IAs, and so when the proposed budget came forward and we didn't address it in the proposed budget, I wanted to make sure that we had an actual plan. And so when this was initially put forth, we only had a lump sum number. And it's only subsequent to our last discussion that I've had more detail provided to us.
Okay, well, that answers my question. I wasn't sure if you were going to bring the full 2.7 because we did get that as a budget answer, and I'll look forward to working with you on it. Thank you.
Okay, all right, no more questions. So Ms. Corbett Sanders, as time is of the essence, if you plan to do something more out of this budget, we will look forward to some clarification on that.
Ms. Strauss, since we're on, yeah.
Bringing an amendment for addressing the IA scale. Our top priority has been the investment in our professional staff, and the IAs are part of that professional staff and should have equal commitment from this board to address their compensation.
Okay, thank you. So time is of the essence. Ms. McLaughlin?
Just adding to that, I'll work with Ms. Corbett Sanders before Thursday, but I'd like to see if maybe we can blend in what I noted earlier, which is if we can do some benchmarking that I think might be very helpful for bringing a greater clarity on why we need to be investing the money and no longer underpaying our IAs as the
Well, actually, Ms.
concern is.
McLaughlin, in the initial response, there is a recognition that even though we did a salary benchmarking in the past, we froze salaries and we didn't fully address it, and now our IAs are being paid less than the market average. And so I agree with you, but I think that it's a two-part analysis. I don't think by the time we adopt this budget, we will have a true benchmarking on the scope of work that our IAs addressing or handling in the classroom. That's a different and longer discussion, I think.
I agree, Ms. Corbett Sanders, but since one of the things that I think you're hearing a lot of support from the board is, as we begin an installment in the FY20 budget, a commitment from staff that, again, it's not about a salary benchmarking, because that's the easy part. It's the job description benchmarking, and that should be part of then the
I would do
deeper
that.
commitment.
Absolutely, and I would
Great.
see that as a follow-on motion to the budget.
Excellent.
Okay, all right. So anyway, time is of the essence. We need to figure this one out. Okay, the next is a follow-on motion from Ms. Polchak. Do you have any questions, statements?
Yeah, so this one's a little bit related. I think we've had a lot of conversations. We're on the living wage one, correct? Okay. We've had a lot of conversations about what should be the living wage, what should be our living wage compared to the county, or which formula should we be using? Does it include only hourly workers, or should it also be looking at IA salaries that are yearly? So I think we're starting to make small steps. And the purpose of this follow-on motion is really to take into account, the different information and ways to look at living wage calculations that are out there. So hopefully we're not kind of creating it every year, what we think it should be, but that we start to benchmark and to work with our county partners, with our employee associations, and figure out what the long-term plan is. So there shouldn't be a number attached to this, rather it should be supporting the work that we're doing on the hourly living wage as well as the IA living wage.
Okay, great. So, Ms. Corbett Sanders?
I fully support that. I would actually like us to have some sort of joint working group between the Board of Supervisors and the school board addressing the living wage. I think that that is something, and you and I have spoken about it in the past. I would be happy to put on as a follow-on motion to the budget with you, a call for a joint effort between the two boards.
Sure, I'm happy to incorporate it here. I didn't want to be overly prescriptive, but happy to add that in here as well.
Yeah, I just think it's critical because we can't keep doing this piecemeal.
Okay, so there may be some adjustment to this, so please let us know what the adjustment will
Feel
be.
free to
Ms. Evans, okay, Dr. Brabrand?
One thing is you two do your talking, and again, ultimately what you two want to do, but if you could direct the county executive and myself to work together to bring a proposal to both boards, which might let us get to that as expeditiously as possible. And if you feel after that you need additional stakeholder engagement, we could, but something to think about as you come up
Thank you,
with your
Dr.
final
Brabrand.
language.
Okay, so I see notes being taken, which is good. Okay, Ms. Evans?
Yes, so Ms. Palchik, do you know at this point what your amendment on living wage is going to be, or are you still working on that?
So we're getting to it, but I believe Mr. Moon and I would like to look at the 1550 for next year.
And do you
Which
have a
is-
price on that?
It was $87,000 above the current
Okay.
amendment.
Okay, so that was my one question, but, and I also want to raise in this, I had asked a question, and Mr. McElveen had expressed an interest in this as well, about how many of our hourly workers do not get, who work 20 to 29.9 hours don't get benefits. There are 585 in our school system that don't. I did ask a follow-on question to try to flesh out who these folks are, and I'm still not clear on it. The answer that was received recently was hourly employees can work for multiple programs in multiple capacities for different levels of work and report to multiple supervisors, and so they don't have position titles. That answer is confusing me, and I mean, if we have only 585 workers who do in fact work half-time, at least half-time for us, my hope would be we would find them and help them, at least have some sort of a plan for them to eventually get benefits. But I still don't have any sense of who these folks are that work for us at least half-time but don't get benefits.
I guess, is there any staff response to that?
I mean, that's what I'm asking.
And I guess in maybe fleshing out that question, I suspect that there are grant opportunities, there are small issues, because various departments will have part-time, hourly, and some people will pick up those piecemeal. So
Well, I guess I would like a sense of it, because these are folks who work at least half-time for us, at least half-time.
Right.
So who are they?
Yeah, I mean, they're temporary hourly, and that's how they're coded. So they're not working in like a job like we think of it with an FTE, like, oh, this is a temporary hourly instructional assistant, or this is a temporary hourly something else. They work throughout the school system as temporary hourly positions, and that's what they're, funded from. That's what they're classified as, if you will, although I guess they're not classified at all because they're temporary hourly.
Well, can you give me an example of, somebody who works for us at least half-time all the time, but doesn't have a job title? I mean, who are we talking about?
And I guess I'm going to clarify that question because I think I know what you're getting at. The question is, are these people who dependably always work a certain number of hours, or these are people who pick up hours as they become available and therefore are sometimes working half-time, sometimes not half-time, sometimes more than half-time?
It's probably both. It's a variety of scenarios.
So Lee, when I listen to that, what I hear, and if it's not, correct me, right? That's culture we're creating. Positively correct me, please. But correct me. Both. We have a code, we have a position, because I remember, I think I remember when I was principal, we had a temp hourly code, but it's not a defined position. It's whatever a school might ask. It could be homework assistance with a kid. It could be another person doing school security. I mean, we've never really surveyed that code to find out what, I'm being transparent, which is what I think this board wants me to be. But those 550, because of the way we've done the budget code, we don't have a position description for temporary hourly. And we would need to survey principals to really figure out what kind of jobs are in that budget coding.
I mean, I guess you're trying to get at what temporary hourly might not be temporary.
Yes.
And so I guess we could do a report on that employee and when they started working with us and what capacity they've been working in since that time.
So I think where the board's going is we're going to have to figure out how we can create a better description of that category and then determine if that's based on what we hear back, are those things that should be created into defined positions, or should we be doing something? There are people who are temp hourly for 5 years, 10 years, and they're just still in that same.
If these are really folks who are working at least half-time for us, really permanently.
Right.
And they just aren't getting benefits, I'd like to know who they
Right,
are
right.
and why we're not treating them differently. Well, there were 585. So they've given us a number, but really no sense. So I don't need to know each 585, but I
No, but
would like to
themes
get
and categories,
a
right.
sense of who these folks are.
Right.
So
And
that's the
just-
next step.
Yeah, and, okay, so that's the next step. And just for a little history, some years ago, that whole piece was cleaned up so that we identified where people who are routinely always in that category as opposed to where they could be hired to do a specific job that was truly temporary. So whether or not we've got ghost positions or whether or not it's,
Right, and if
we
they
need
truly-
somebody for this number of hours for 3 weeks, could somebody do it?
Right, and if that's truly the case, if this is somebody temporary, then that's a different
Right, because both the
thing.
Board of Supervisors and the school board
Right.
cleaned that up, but it was, none of you were born
And
yet.
then, I mean, I think that's fine, but if it's somebody who really and truly is just working half-time for us year after year after year after
Exactly,
year,
exactly.
then we
What is the
need
status
to
of that?
deal with those
Okay,
individuals.
so that helps, so that's a next step question. Ms. McLaughlin, you wish to speak next?
Yes, briefly, I just wanted to ask, maybe it'll be a next step, that one of the things that we still continue to try and wrap our arms around it, and Ms. Strauss, you referenced it just now, about what has the board of the supervisors and the school board done around people who are truly temporary versus they're working part-time, but consistently working part-time in positions. So I would definitely want to make sure that the next step is looking at having our finance team talk with the board of supervisors and the county government finance team, along with the two HR departments, to make sure there's an alignment here of the information. Because either we will find we are not in sync with what the county government's doing for similarly employed individuals, and we should have more alignment. And then it might be that both boards need to get better in how we're treating those part-time but consistently working for the county in some capacity, whether schools or for government. So I just wanted to make sure that emphasis was there.
Mr. McLaughlin, Mr. McElveen.
So I just wanted to two-finger on Sandy's comment about the part-time workers. I think that it goes beyond those working 20 to 30 hours, because I have had folks approach me saying that they work 40, if not more, hours a week. Perhaps not, consistently, but that they are being locked out of the retirement and benefit system as well, and they feel like they are maintaining that status in order to lock them out of that system. So I do think it's beyond the 585 potentially if we raise it to 40 and above.
Okay, so I think this goes back to sort of the next steps, what we're looking for. Ms. Schultz, you were the next.
So I'm a little bit nervous about this anecdotal conversation that's going on, that we have lots of employees working 40 or more hours who have no job title and are locked out of retirement. I mean, can you all comment on that? I mean, this entire section is making me a little bit, I'm not entirely sure what we're doing. Dr. Brabrand has just shared with us, they haven't even done a survey of who these employees might be. I don't understand the survey, I don't understand the employees, I don't understand the scope, I don't understand the amount of money. It says cost to be determined, and we're spending a lot of time talking about a follow-on motion for something that isn't even scoped, and for people who we don't even understand are in the pool, or how much money this even involves. Can you help me understand?
No, I don't think that this is 583 people that are working 40 hours a week and not receiving benefits. I think they are exactly what they were depicted as, and temporary hourly. I think that if a program manager or an account manager wanted, if they had someone in the situation that it was permanent and it was something that they were doing year after year after year, they would trade their hourly dollars for an FTE so that person did receive benefits. So I think that of the 583, it's going to be the exception, those that have been working year after year in kind of the same job. But we'll have to look at the data. And the 583 people, we know exactly who those people are. We have a list of those positions, which was how we figured out that it was 583 people. We just don't have job descriptions because they are classified as temporary hourly.
Right, and so an organization our size, you want and need flexibility of people to come in and work part-time and pick up work. I would imagine people come in and do things like they help with summer audits, and stuff like that. The notion that we have to move everybody to a full-time wage and a pension-bearing job title will, honestly, guys, out of a $3 billion budget, we're at 450 million is pension right off the top. So we have to have some priorities on even on our follow-on, because what we're doing is we're saying we're taking staff time, to direct staff time to investigate what some part-time, temporary, seasonal employees might do for some pickup work. And frankly, there may be some people in our community that want that want to have some pickup work. They may be, parents who, have, children away at college but don't want a full-time job, or, their second or third income. I just get worried. I feel like we're going down a rabbit hole on that living wage is somehow expanding to everybody has to have a full-time job and full-time benefits. And I don't know how you fund that going forward. I really don't. I don't know that it's fiscally responsible.
Okay, I have three more people on this question. We have one more follow-on, and then I want to leave time for next steps and any other comments on the actual amendments. Warning everybody, we have 30 minutes. Mr. Moon.
I was just looking at the regulation. 4310.9. That's where both temporary employees and temporary assignments are defined. I mean, I would like to urge my board members, if you have time, go take a look. It talks about temporary employees being someone who works less than 1 year, basically on as-needed basis. And we also have a temporary assignments that who may be working full-time or less than full-time position for temporary assignments. Before or after their normal work hours or contract days. So 500 some, whether, I don't know whether they are coded as a temporary employees or temporary assignments or just hourly employees, but wanted to give you these definitions for your consumption and hopefully receive some information about whether any of those 500 some employees go beyond 1 year, and hopefully not, because there will no longer be temporary employees then. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moon. Ms. Evans, and then Ms. McLaughlin, and then we're moving on.
So I just responding to Mrs. Schultz, no one's suggesting to give full benefits to somebody who's truly a temporary hourly worker. You know, that's not the proposal here. The proposal is to get answers to a question that we don't have the answer yet as to who the folks are and if they are truly temporary, hourly, or if they are something else. So that's what I'm trying to determine, if in fact these are, because it was said temporary/hourly, but if that's all they are, that's one thing. If they really are just hourly employees that aren't getting benefits and work for us year after year, as Mr. McElveen said, even up to full-time, then we need to do something about.
Ms. McLaughlin?
My question just is, why isn't that a budget question, and why is that a follow-on motion to the actual budget?
That is a budget question, Mrs. Schultz. As I just said, it's not a follow-on motion. I was referring to my budget question. It's budget question 41, and I had a follow-on because the first answer I got didn't frankly answer my question. And so if you look at the budget questions, you'll find the budget questions and the answer.
We're just sort of collecting everybody's comments that somehow seem to be a part of the follow-on, so we've covered the ground. Ms. McLaughlin, very brief.
Yeah, I just think it's very important to emphasize here that this is something that can't get solved within a few weeks, a few months, and it is going to take time. And so I appreciate Ms. Palchek's follow-on motion, which is the board is going to decide at the budget vote whether we want to collectively, as the board, say this is a budget priority for next year, and it might, and I would hope we could get some understanding within the next year for FY21. And as Ms. Evans said, this isn't about temporary employees. It's not taking away those options, Ms. Schultz, as you laid out. But what it is very concerning to me is, even though we're the third largest employer in Virginia, or roughly in that top three, 585 employees is a very big organization within any company. So we have to have some sort of clear understanding of what we're doing that's just created, again, a fairness and equity. If you are working for us consistently and you're not a temporary worker, then we need to make sure that we benchmark with the Board of Supervisors, because you work for the county, you work for schools, it should be similar, and then we should be doing a best practice of what we do for people who are working hard, and they shouldn't be prevented from receiving the living wage and any benefits that we know we're doing on the county government side.
All right, thank you. Ms. Palchek, you have the last follow-on, briefly?
Yes, I will go through that. And before I do, just speaking to the last one, I know it's anecdotal, but I appreciate Ms. Evans' question around that. I know one employee that until she became full-time this year, for at least a decade, if not longer, has served half-time hourly employee in one department, half-time hourly employee in another department, and did not have access to those benefits until this year. So I don't know how many of those are there, so I support getting that information. For my other and I will send recommended changes to that one based on what Dr. Brabrand said. For the final one, and this one, I know it has a price tag next to it. I'm not necessarily saying that's where we're going, but my understanding and having met with the Service Employees Associations and worked with Mr. Plattenberg is that we have fallen very far behind the recommendations for custodial and trade staffing. And those have not been reapproved since we had the budget cuts over a decade ago. So based on the Gibson report, I believe we are very far behind hundreds of positions. I'm not recommending or requesting that we go all the way there, but this, as a follow-on motion, in addition to the amendments to help us add a little bit more in custodial and trades position this year, is that the superintendent and staff do a full review and help us come up with a multi-year plan of what we need to do to make sure our buildings are safe, our HVAC systems are maintained, and that we take into account, we know that our schools are used for 17 hours a day very often, and that there are no specific capital funds truly associated to the increased use of our schools. So, hope to have everyone's support and happy to take any questions on this amendment.
Okay, thank you. And going back to Ms. Schultz, I think maybe you wanted to speak on a previous piece.
No,
Go ahead.
you gave,
Okay, well, I'm going to go back to Ms. Schultz because I think she wanted to talk on something else
no,
before this.
if other people want to talk on this, but I told you I wanted to talk at the end when
Sure.
everybody's finished.
Okay,
the vote.
I just don't want to neglect you. Ms. McLaughlin?
Yes, I appreciate Ms. Palchik bringing this up, and I don't disagree with the fact that we want to maintain our buildings to the best standards possible, and then we also want to do it in a timely way so it doesn't cost us more money by having repairs that should have been done sooner, and then we know, even as homeowners, that you're just going to end up paying more later. However, I do want to raise the board's awareness again that when we're talking about staffing standards for facilities and maintenance and custodians and how far behind we are, and Ms. Palchik's follow-ons come with a price tag about $37 million when you add the two together. Keep in mind, we still have one school nurse per 3,000 students, and it's supposed to be one school nurse per 550 students. So when we think about as a division, what we're doing in terms of meeting the needs of students and the whole child and making sure that kids can be healthy and in school in order to then achieve and learn, I want to make sure we're having some context here about where we're making our budget priorities, and I don't want it to be in a vacuum. We have a lot of staffing standards that aren't being met, and it's not just in custodians and facilities, and I just don't want that lost in Dr. Brabrand and leadership team's focus. We really should be actually receiving something that shows us where are we in best practices for staffing formulas across these support positions outside of just teachers, and how far behind are we? I don't want to just look at this in a vacuum only.
Okay, as we go on, just to remind people, we have another budget work session Thursday night where we will be talking, I think, only on amendments, I hope. So Ms. Evans, and I'll go back to Ms. Schultz.
So I just had two questions, and I'm going by memory here. My recollection was that one of the biggest savings recommended in the Gibson report was to change the way we did staffing on the custodians. Was it not, Mr. Plattenberg? Do you recall? I thought that we changed from having that we had more field custodians as a result of the Gibson report, and that was like
We
one of the-
did. We changed, what we did was they called them monitors. We went ahead and had 10 monitors that also oversaw. It was for coordination, communication, a little more effective utilization. But still, we were down a significant number.
So okay.
And the percentages and the amount of the application of how we do it.
Yeah.
The APPA talks about, so many thousand square feet per custodian, and we're way up higher than that. During the daytime, in fact, when this was being discussed, I spoke with a number of our principals at each level, elementary and the secondary, middle and high. And their conversations were, during the day, these porters are too busy dealing with unclogging bathroom facilities, with moving stuff, with cafeteria cleanup. Some of the smaller schools, that's all that individual that has during the day time to do is to clean between the mass amount of students coming in and out of the cafeteria. So the evening work was really where we were way down in terms of the percentage of square feet.
Well, is what we did on the field with the field custodians, did that make the situation worse?
No, what it did was it helped organize. It helped us
Oh, I
gain
see.
that edge.
Okay.
We're still not where those numbers are.
Okay, so we didn't do it, okay.
No, it helped for consistency,
Okay.
inspect what you expect.
And we were able to send them, because I thought the theory there was we were going to send them where they were needed, as opposed to assigning them always to the same school.
Correct, and yet we're still
just
woefully
down.
behind.
We're still
Correct,
down,
yes, ma'am.
okay. And then my next question is for Ms. Palchek, unless I missed it, do you know what your amendment is going to be and the cost of it at this point on this one?
So currently, the way it's written, and hearing my colleagues, I'm happy to make it, slightly change it. Right now, it says, "I move that the school board direct the superintendent and staff to continue to work to create a multi-year plan to be, I can say, to be better aligned with the Gibson report recommendations in our custodial and trades positions, starting in FY '21, and to include staffing ratios for these positions." So to me, it's really important, and I 100% agree with you, Megan. I want to be very clear, this is not requesting what the additional cost would be to get there. I'm also hearing, when we talk about students, mold is growing in our schools, right? And being able to address that more quickly, HVAC systems that are going out, right? So the proper maintenance of our facilities also, to me, right, is preventative. So we're not, right, sending kids to the nurse because of something that's happening in our facility. So I 100% agree this should be done in coordination, and hopefully some of these amendments are just pointing toward the superintendent that we want all of the staffing to be looked at. And
So is the cost in fiscal '21?
so there's no cost for this year. This is a follow-on motion.
I see, okay.
And the cost information, I believe, just looks at what it would be to go all the way to the Gibson recommendation.
Okay.
I'm not asking for that, so I'm happy to say to be better aligned. But my understanding is, as Mr. Plattenberg said, that just in some other areas, we are pretty far behind where we should be for appropriate maintenance.
And I'll agree with Ms. McLaughlin about it would be good for us to get an overview of what, to benchmark all of our positions where we're behind, because we know we are behind in others as well. So, but I agree with you that we certainly need to be maintaining our buildings, and if we're that far behind, we definitely need to be doing something about it.
Okay, all right, so if you're going to change your language, I encourage you to do that quickly.
Well, and it sounds like, I did have the other follow-on that came in late that I'm happy to pull up after Ms. Schultz speaks on the similar staffing, the way we do our language services. So I had sent it to everyone. I know it was too late for the translation services to be incorporated in the main document. So maybe after Ms. Schultz presents hers, I do have the language. I'm
Okay.
happy to bring it back up. I'm not sure the
All right,
process
that's
on
fine. Well,
that.
let's go to Ms. Schultz,
Okay.
because she's been waiting. and
So,
then we'll see.
yes, so one of the follow-ons that I had requested that I don't see was the cost, and it was very minimal, for a Teach for Tomorrow trades equivalent to the a Trades for Tomorrow that was the equivalent of the Teach for Tomorrow. And I think you had said something like 1/6 of a full-time equivalent. I mean, it's very minimal. But this goes to the meeting with the Support Services Advisory Council, and the fact that we have, so this is not our staffing that everybody's talking about. This is our own students. And when we have 40% of our trades personnel are eligible for retirement within 10 years, we're not growing our own trades personnel. And this talks about career and technical education. So I was hoping to have had that. Because it is so minimal, I was looking for that, but I don't remember the exact cost. That's
Okay, so
one.
Ms. Schultz, you'd like this as a follow-on, so you'd like to propose
Well, I've got to
something.
have an option as a follow-on if we can't figure out a
Okay.
way to squeeze it into the budget.
Okay, so we will look forward to working with staff.
Yeah,
so-
we may need to work with staff
Okay.
just a little bit. The Teacher for Tomorrow is a course a teacher teaches at .17 is to teach the course. I don't know whether we have the Trades for Tomorrow set up as a defined.
Right, which is why I wanted to bring it
Curriculum.
up as a follow-on because I hadn't seen anything
Right.
back on that
We,
yet.
we did in the 80s, 20, 25 years ago, did have internships for kids, summer internships for kids in our trades courses to come and get experience to work in the summer. So maybe it's working with staff online and we can come up with a follow-on to address the
The last
point.
I heard, our trades internships are down to like 9. I mean, I used to go to that ceremony, and I miss that. And I think we're missing the boat on messaging to a lot of kids.
Right.
I mean, we do great with our graduation rates, but not everybody's going on to college. So I really do want that information. And then the other thing is, I pre-stipulate that not everybody's going to love it, but I'm probably going to offer it anyway. I've looked at the data. I don't know what it costs us to do our budget dog and pony show that goes from January till now, and all of the haranguing that we do with the Board of Supervisors, which has gotten a little less haranguey this year, I'm glad to say. But the reality is that we don't have any more than a 53% transfer. And I think we could save staff and us a lot of time and a lot of money if we did a flat transfer. And if it's going to be a homemade pie, it's going to be 53%. If it's going to be a Mrs. Fields pie, it's going to be 53%. If it's going to be a Costco pie, it's going to be 53%. Because whatever the county's budget is, it doesn't matter year after year. Our transfer's been 53% in good years and in bad years. And so, I think we go through a lot of rigmarole, and I don't even know that staff could quantify the cost of all of this, but it's a lot. It's a lot. And we just may save our system a lot of strife. A lot of pitting, a lot of, hand-wringing in the community that we're pitting one special interest group against another, that it's special ed, or it's sports, or it's, fees, or, and I think we gin up a lot of strife within the community over much of this, as opposed to maybe front-ending the work on the budget, and then just having discussions among our board about what our priorities are going to be.
Okay, I just want to circle back and Ms. Schultz, on your question about the trades piece and training for kids, I could see heads nodding that staff will work with that.
Yeah, Mr. Plattenberg will follow up with you offline.
Okay,
We'll
all
get
right, so
something.
we'll expect something on that. And just in response to a set transfer, I will just say I will not support that. That's kind of the Prince William piece, but that's fine. We can debate that later if you intend to bring that up.
I'd prefer you not pre-establish that you're not going to support something we haven't talked about.
That's fine.
And that the data actually supports. So that's a closed-mindedness that I'm hoping we'll get away from, and we'll actually have an honest discussion instead of a predetermined outcome.
It's fine, but I get to speak my mind as well. Okay, I am going to, since Ms. Keys-Gamarra has just arrived, and you haven't had an opportunity to speak yet on all of this, we're talking on follow-ons, so I will go to you, Ms. McLaughlin, had a quick go-back, and then we need to do Okay. Oh, did staff wish to speak? Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that the Teach for Tomorrow for trades that you mentioned, that's a next step from May 2nd. Staff's working on that. We just don't have an answer yet.
Okay, I'm going to let Ms. Keys-Gamarra speak, because you haven't. I think that she hasn't had a chance to talk at all, so I will. Okay, and we'll come back to that. Can we give you a chance?
Yeah, mine is more general because, in statements that were made earlier, and I apologize if I missed in somebody's comment that may have covered this. But there were questions regarding the Gibson report with respect to Ms. Palchik's recommendation. And I'm just wondering if we can get clarification to understand, first of all, what Ms. McLaughlin said with respect to the nurses' recommendations, if there are other such areas where staffing recommendations have been made, or we've done reports and those recommendations have not been met. I agree, we do need to examine that without it being in a vacuum, because we all want to, provide, as you said, Ms. Palchik, the safety, but we also need to be able to make an informed decision. Dr. Brabrand, I know I may be asking for the world, but how can we address that? And please stop my time because he wants to talk.
I would just say real quickly, one nugget after year two, we've put a strategic lens on compensation, and we've really moved the bar, and this board's done a tremendous amount. We need to take that same strategic One Fairfax lens to all of our formulas across the division. We started with the staffing formula. As I look back, we could have started and phased about what formulas we would look at and bring to the board the results of that work and then offer it to budget implications. We started really with staffing, and we didn't really change anything from an equity lens as much as just trying to move it forward. I had already asked Mr. Smith and Ms. Burden to start to pull all of our formulas and do a strategic analysis. So it's work we're already planning to do, and I think we need to bring you that work and let you see it, so that you, as you're weighing all these things, can see how many formulas are we a little bit away from the desired state, how many are we way farther away, and then balance the priorities that are behind those formulas, whether it's general ed staffing, special ed staffing, EL staffing, educational support staffing. So we're working on that, and we'll work, I think, as we plan for our budget in the fall, how we can bring you an update on how we're going to go through all those formulas and figure out a layout, because the work involved in that, it's a tremendous amount of work. As I said, some of that hasn't been reviewed in years. It's time to begin the review, and we can at least bring you the structure and our plan of attack, and share that with the board.
Well, I think my concern is we want to consider her requests with respect to the custodians
Right.
and facilities. I'm not sure we have enough information to be able to look at it
Right.
as thoroughly and respectfully as we need to. And so that would be my overall concern.
So for FY20, she shared amendments, then there was some back and forth about what we felt in discussion with staff that had to have, which you all can look at. And then I think you're exactly right. For the longer term review of this, we need to bring it all together and share our current state with desired state and what the best practices say or don't say about those formulas. But I'm not going to have that by the end of this week, but I think that's exactly where we need to go with a strategic lens.
Well, I'll just express that concern.
Okay.
And I know with respect to the mold, parents can, just so I'll say this, I know I've made that request because my kids have allergies, and we can put in requests, and I know that we want to get to those things quickly. But if there is a concern, parents can put those requests in, and facilities typically is able to follow up. Mr. Plattenberg, he's so happy I'm saying this. Anyway, with respect to, I think I'll stop there. With respect to the 53%, I'm certainly willing to receive the information and consider it. I would say that I still would like to have the flexibility for that number to go up, depending on, I'm not sure I want to lock in a number. If, for example, we come into a situation, for example, where the county was able to provide 54%, would we be limiting ourselves? Would be a concern for me.
Okay, we have 3 more people who would like to speak. We need to get to go-backs yet, and we have not much time left. Ms. McLaughlin. Sorry.
Yeah, I wanted to speak to Ms. Schultz's request on the trades for tomorrow. Having gone to the Teach for Tomorrow ceremony, I would like to actually make sure somehow we capture it in next steps, but why we won't continue to grow that as well across to far more schools across the county. And so there's that piece, but Ms. Schultz, you're very much correct. When we look at the opportunities in the trades, and I think that for a lot of our students, they may not even be aware of the opportunities in this profession and the growth for opportunity in salary earnings. I mean, we really have a tremendous opportunity in the 10th largest school system to do this, and it's my understanding there is a shortage of people in the trades. So, but not knowing the salary and earnings potential, students may not even realize, wow, that's a really wonderful opportunity, and it's here in Fairfax County. So I would really like to emphasize that. And then to Ms. Schultz on the budget, I certainly look forward to having a greater dialogue on that. My focus and goal is that we will every year engage in a deep review of how we're spending $3 billion and what we bring forward to the board of supervisors, whether it's a 53% request, a 54% request, the key piece is how we're making sure that we've surveyed and identified the needs of the division. And yes, still have what I think has been some of the best dialogues in the last several years with the Board of Supervisors of being mindful of, we are one Fairfax, we serve one county, all county services have value. But I think the bigger focus just needs to be doing exactly what we are supposed to be doing, which is the board's review of strategic funding.
Just on the Teach for Tomorrow, as I understand it, Dr. Brabrand, it is expanding greatly next year, right?
Yes, we're
Right.
over doubling the size.
Right, so that's taken care of.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Evans and Mr. McElveen? Okay, no, okay, Mr. McElveen?
Just very briefly, in response to the proposal to lock us in at 53%, I would argue that 53% of the budget is not enough to cover the needs of our school system. And further, I think locking us into a rate would prevent us from being able to respond to fluctuations in demographics and the ever-increasing needs of our population. Not to mention the fact that 88% of our budget is personnel. It would limit our ability to compensate them appropriately.
Yes, I'm sorry, Ms. Corbett-Sanders.
Thank you. Two things. One, as far as the trades for tomorrow, I would encourage people to look at, I do think we have to create additional opportunities, but we do have some fantastic academy programs that also have strategic partnerships that are expanding with different organizations to create some of those internships and mentorships in the trades. Having said that, we do need to do a better job of promoting those opportunities, because oftentimes we focus solely on career and technical education and college readiness, and we haven't spent enough time on educating the community on the great opportunities that are available in the trades. These are jobs that cannot be outsourced to any place else in the world. Everybody is going to need people working in these areas. And I would suggest that in addition to those trades pieces, that we have to have greater focus on creating entrepreneurial courses for our students, so that they understand that learning the trades and being able to run their own business, so creating those type of opportunities is critical. And that's one of the reasons why I've spent some time with the CTE advisory, as well as Dr. Presidio's staff in just this area, and have brought a number of organizations that are looking to create additional internships and mentorships. So I'm happy to work with you, Ms. Schultz. But that work has been going on for quite a long time in our academies.
Thank you. Can we pull up next steps, please? And again, since our time is up.
Ms. Strauss, I apologize, but so that one other follow-on motion, should I wait to discuss it? Will there be time later?
Well, let's see if we can get through next steps. And do you have the language?
I do, and I reshared it with everyone just now.
Okay, all right, well, let's see if we can quickly get through it. Can we increase the size of the print? Or is that not possible? Thank you, okay.
And I
Ms.
will
Golubs?
remind our colleagues that this is not our last opportunity. We'll be continuing this conversation this
Thursday,
week.
I've had it since April, so just whenever
Okay.
we can, I would love.
Okay, this is Ms. Evans, report back to the board on the possible adding of us. Okay, I think we discussed
Well,
that.
actually, I didn't say high school.
Okay, you want to correct that?
Dr. Brabrand had suggested that let's see.
I think Dr.
Right.
Brabrand was suggesting a larger piece and then
Right,
being able to get.
Right, and so if we want to get an estimate, I mean, I'm asking for an estimate for this, for middle school,
Okay,
but,
we may get more than that from staff.
okay,
That's ultimately what you are personally interested.
right. Adding a bus per week, one bus, well, so in other words, I've asked a budget question on this. So I've already asked a budget question on this. And so I think Mr. Plattenberg knows what I'm looking for. But yes, I'd like to report back on
Okay, so does staff understand, maybe we reference a budget question in this, the answer? Okay?
Right.
Okay, all right. Number 2 is again, Ms. Evans, change the color that indicates neutral from green. Is that okay?
Right.
Okay? All right. The third one is Ms. Corbett Sanders. Does this speak to?
Essentially, it's expanding the staffing standards chart to include the impact for students with disabilities.
Okay.
So
is
I
that-
think that's,
Yep.
Okay, and staff understands what this is?
If we could add those first 3 words, expand staffing's chart to provide data.
Okay, expand staffing to provide. Okay? Is that okay? Everybody's all right with that? Okay. Number 4 is Ms. Evans.
Now, Lee, you're down there, again, if I've said something and you're going, then throw it out there.
Well, we didn't change, the chart that we're talking about shows what had been under the old staffing standard and the new staffing standard, but we didn't change any of the special education staffing standard formulas.
I think she's just wanting us to review to see whether maybe under the special needs area where we have special needs for the staffing reserve, whether we've got special ed as a component of that.
yes. It's
Yes, a
just-
percentage of the staffing reserve is allocated for special education and unique needs.
Right.
But that wasn't impacted by the elementary staffing standard chart.
But it should be all on one chart so people understand what is given for the special, the students who have special ed needs and the rest, and the gen ed population.
You know what, we can provide the special ed formula for elementary school. That's what we'll do. She's just saying, put that formula on with the same chart that we already have for elementary general ed staffing. Is that difficult to do? If it is,
I mean, we'll
Well,
have to
what-
look back, we'll have to.
okay, we'll look back and we can
backwards
follow up with her if
because
there's a,
the
or the board.
Staffing reserve.
Okay, it's a request
take a
from the
look.
community. Okay, all right. It is a little more complex for special ed because it's numerous. Okay, Ms. Evans?
So I guess I would first say that we've missed one of my next steps on the equity piece, going back to the buses where we're going to get more information on that. I also wanted to have a work session in November on the superintendent's plan for equity and after-school activities.
Okay, so yeah, that would be a work session in November. Consider adding a work session.
Well, no, I'm not saying consider, I'm saying have one.
Okay, schedule.
Yes,
So not-
schedule.
Okay,
Schedule a work session in November on the superintendent's proposal for providing more equity in after-school and extracurricular
after school and extracurricular
activities.
activities, okay.
And so, again, not,
And I think you don't want consider scheduling, you want
yes,
to
it's
say.
just schedule.
Schedule.
Schedule a work session.
Okay. There you go. Yeah. And just schedule.
Schedule, not scheduling.
Take the gerund off. There you go.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah,
All right.
so that captures that. And so number 4, that doesn't really capture what I'm looking for. And I would expand it based on Mr. McElveen's comments as well.
I would say more than 20 hours.
Right, say, provide, it's not how many though. It's, let's go back to the start. It's provide information on employees who work at least 20 hours a week. Who do not receive benefits. On what type of work they're doing for us and for how long. The idea being that we want to find out if these are truly temporary employees or if they are in fact working for us at least half-time and year after year and not receiving benefits. That's the point of this question. Mr. McElveen, do you want to take a look at the way this is?
My question is whether or not staff understands.
Yeah, that's, yeah.
Dr. Rayburn, you're good with that?
We're good.
Okay, all right.
I think you should be careful about just 20 hours a week, because how many weeks per year? For example, our IT interns in the summer are going to work 20 hours a week, but they're not year-round. So
So,
maybe adding minimum number of weeks per year or something.
right, that's,
It's part-time versus temporary.
so work at least 20 hours, right, but that does get to it. Work at least 20 hours a week, but
Year-round?
year-round. Well,
Teachers are 10 months a year.
so,
Let us look into it, and then we'll take what Mary Beth's saying and staff and
Why
figure
don't we
out the
s-
parameters.
why don't we say for most of the year? An
Okay.
average of 20 hours, at least an average of 20 hours a week for most of the year.
Okay.
Does that do it?
That's the spirit of it, and then we'll look at the data to really inform whether we're missing something or something is falling through.
Right. Okay, thank you.
All right, and the next one is Ms. McLaughlin.
Yeah, 5 and 6, I think could probably be combined.
Okay.
Well, actually, keep 6, don't wipe it out, because that was supposed to be based on the IAs, that we're supposed to be benchmarking the IAs in terms of their job descriptions and, delivery of performance as opposed to how we're paying them. And that wasn't captured at all. So 6 should just be undertake a benchmarking study of the scope of work responsibilities. Yep. Yeah, that was
Want to say 4 IAs?
for our instructional assistants. And did we want to add in the PHAs, Ms. Sanders? Okay.
And PHAs.
And PHAs. And then you can delete the rest of that part there. And then number 5 was related to Ms. Evans' 4 above. The only thing I would change on there is, again, it wasn't that we were wanting to be in alignment with just part-time temporary. It's our part-time non-temporary. Because the bottom line is, we've got plenty of positions that are part-time, they're not temporary, and yet they're not getting benefits. So. No, I really just want to fix 5. I don't want to start a number, okay. Oh, all right.
I guess, Dr. Rayburn, is that?
Part-time temporary versus non-temporary. Hourly workers, shouldn't we put in there about the 20 hours or more? Part-time 20 hours or more?
I guess, Dr. Rayburn, you need to, because you would be the
Well,
one that would
this
be-
is partly what the board member wants. I mean, we can compare, you want us to compare with the county, part-time, temporary, part-time 20 hours or more, and then,
Well,
what do you mean by non-temporary hourly workers? Or do you just mean, and just then hourly?
My point is that I think whatever we're doing right now with our part-time employees, whether they're temporary or they're not temporary, it's not just what we're doing and whether we want to justify it in our own vacuum. We are one Fairfax, so we should be looking at how is the county government, along with county schools, treating part-time employees who work 20 hours or more a week in a temporary status
And
versus a
temporary.
non-temporary status.
Okay, how about part-time 20 hours or more and temporary, and temporary hourly workers instead of
and-
non-temporary?
Yeah, and so there's an alignment with respect to benefits.
Right. Regarding both benefits and
So
compensation.
it's not that there's alignment of information, it's make sure there's an alignment with respect to benefits.
Compensation or no?
Yeah, we do in compensation. Benefits and compensation.
Let me make sure to clarify something here, because I think it's important. Do you want us to bring you the data and then the board can decide whether there should be alignment or non-alignment? Or are you directing me to go and create the alignment with the county across all those categories?
No, you're correct. It's
Well,
to work with staff to
Right, we'll bring the data,
The data, okay.
so,
gather information
yeah,
about this alignment.
yes,
Okay, all right,
about the, yeah.
that's right,
Yeah,
okay.
to gather information, so take alignment out.
Okay, good, okay, and then we
Yeah, you can
fix-
keep alignment in that way, because then it's the information about the alignment.
Okay,
There you go. Thank you.
thank you, and we've done 6, okay, and then 7.
That wasn't what I was saying. Number 7 was, and it was actually Ms. Schultz, unless it's somewhere there, but it's, I was just saying I was in support of,
Okay, so we can take 7 off.
You can take
'cause
7
this was
off.
teach for in the
Yeah.
trades. Okay, so we'll eliminate number 7. Thank you. And then the next one is Ms. Evans' scheduled work session in November, which we've already added. And then the last is trades for tomorrow, which is Ms. Schultz, okay? So
mine's
got
not
that?
on there.
Okay,
Another one.
all right, so what was your other one?
Number 8 was already noted at the May 2nd work session, so we're just preparing the answer. So we
Okay.
wouldn't necessarily have to have that one.
All right, great, so that one is in process. Okay, so we had another one that we're
Yeah,
missing?
so both, I had offered this, and Ms. Keys-Gamarra expressed support for this, that, and Dr. Brabrand, you captured it pretty well, but it had to do with looking at our current staffing versus best practice staffing related to other positions beyond just the trades. And custodians, I don't want to make it everything for now, I want to make it a bite size. My bite size would be social workers, psychologists, and school nurses, because
So you want best, okay, so can you, Provide
so
the word.
yes, we would like to have provide the board with information about the current staffing versus the
in specifically,
current staffing for school nurses, social workers, and psychologists.
and you want to benchmark that against best practice and other public
Well,
schools?
that's,
She had it versus best practice.
yeah,
Okay.
provide the board with information about,
Okay,
yeah.
so that's information on
practice
that. Okay,
staffing.
all right. So is there anything else?
Well,
on-
and then I guess, Dr. Brabrand, we want you to and provide costs associated with that. Because it's one thing just that we're gonna get information, but it can stay with number 8. So it's information and cost up at the
Now,
top. We're just
you know,
information.
I may not have that in 2 days, right?
Oh, gosh,
I mean,
no.
I mean, You're
This
looking
is-
ahead.
This is with regard to, Ms. Palchuk had her long-term
Right.
one of FY
Right,
'21,
which
a
is a-
multi-year plan.
Okay, so
Yeah.
this is like a budget question.
No, it's going to end up, I'm going to put it into the budget as a follow-on motion, because I would like to have board support that
Okay.
not only are we going to direct what Ms. Palchuk wants, I think we need to be doing
Right.
this in
Okay.
these
So
areas.
all I would say, I'm full support of this, but I'd ask the board to think about whether we could even enlarge this a little bit, because we really want to take a strategic staffing review across all of our formulas. And then,
Yeah, well, that was the point. I'm glad.
Put your,
It's not on, okay. That was the point of my comment, Ms. McLaughlin, was to, and I'm certainly in support of looking at these, but I think that we need the perspective of what are we working with respect to best practices for our staffing in as many areas as we can examine, which I realize is a whale of a request. However, I'm not sure how we can evaluate some of the things that we're being asked to evaluate if we don't have that perspective. And
I
so-
agree, Ms. Keys-Gamarra, here's my problem. I've run into this with other requests I've made. I am not going to be patient as a board member to sit and find out that it's going to take us years to come answer the question that you just said. So if it's a matter of we're looking at some areas on where we're woefully behind, and Ms. Palchuk wants support for trades and custodians, I'm just saying, maybe what we need to have Dr. Brabrand direct him to do is identify our critical need staffing, not all of your staffing. What do you all identify as leadership team, critical needs we don't have in our buildings that are essential to our One Fairfax and our strategic plan? Do you hear what I'm saying?
I'm
I
not
really-
disagreeing.
Yeah, I know,
I
I'm
have a
just- yeah.
suggestion for
Yeah.
Thursday.
Yeah.
If we can have, we may not be able to have all of the information in terms of the body, but we might be able to have the information in terms of what areas where we are sorely lacking. And that would also give us perspective for this discussion. I certainly am interested in the areas that Ms. McLaughlin has identified. But I am very concerned about making a decision in a vacuum.
Yep.
I completely agree. That's not what I'm asking,
So-
to make a decision in
Okay.
vacuum.
I think you all, we'll work with you all if you want it to be a follow-on motion to the budget, and we can have time to come up with areas of a strategic staffing review, which is what I think I hear you saying.
Okay, so strategic staffing review seems to be,
And then we can talk, board members can talk about the components, but frankly, I would want to look at as many things that we think are critical. You may have specifics that you want as board members to be sure are included, and we can do that.
okay, Ms. Evans?
So I'm going to agree with Ms. McLaughlin and Ms. Keys-Gamarra. I guess I'm again agreeing. But what I'm hearing is kind of a two-step process. We need something for our immediate decisions. At the same time, Dr. Brabrand is telling us that he's going to do an ongoing strategic look. And I absolutely agree that we don't want to be making these decisions in a vacuum. We need to know from the superintendent where is he hearing we really are behind, whether it's in facilities, whether it's in psychologists, if it's, I mean, we only, we heard at budget hearings that we had very few behavior intervention specialists, and that around an amendment. Thank you, Ms. Keys-Gamarra, for that amendment. But doing it piece by piece is truly not, I mean, I think we need to do that, but doing it piece by piece is not the way to be doing it.
Okay, I
May
think
I
we need
speak
to,
to that because it's my motion?
very briefly,
I will be very, so I'm very happy and I appreciate the conversation. This really did start from something I'd heard. I think we've all heard different things. So that being said, I'm happy to incorporate Ms. McLaughlin's language and any other critical needs, requested from the superintendent. So I'm happy to amend my motion. I just want to get the ball rolling. I think we're getting there. So thank you.
okay, you had one more piece that you wanted to bring up briefly?
Yes, let me pull it up. I did send it to everyone. I believe the clerks also have it. This is a little bit related, also concerns I've been hearing. The motion about the ability to have appropriate language interpreters for meetings, including IEPs, last minute moves to grab staff, and looking at the way we're structured centrally and our ability to help address interpreting needs. So the motion is, in an effort to improve the provision of required interpreting services for the division, the board directs the superintendent to review the needs of the FCPS Language Services Program. This will include data supporting the interpreting needs of the division, as well as staffing and administrative needs for the program. Additionally, Language Services, in collaboration with HR, will review compensation rates as related to FCPS part-time hourly and at-will multilingual interpreters. So it ties back a little bit to what Ms. Evans' question was. Some of those are interpreter positions. Just a little background, in 17-18, we had 22,595 total interpreting jobs provided, and 250 plus part-time hourly interpreters, and only 2 FTE full-time Spanish interpreters for the entire division. So a lot of this work, and sometimes the administrative team, I know, goes out across the division to help fill in gaps last minute. I believe often jobs are dropped last minute, whether it's because of our salary rate, et cetera. So this really is, having worked with Teresa Johnson and Leah Skarpsky and their team, this was the language recommended from them as to how to start to do a study of how to help improve access to language services.
Okay, and this is a follow-on.
It's a follow-on.
Okay.
There's absolutely no budget
Okay,
attached
so
to
we're
it.
looking for data. Okay, Ms. Keys-Gamarra, you get the last word.
I just had a question following that, because the jobs you're referring to are the requests for an interpreter, I assume, in various situations. And does that include having access to an interpreter via telephone? I know that we do that a lot in the legal arena, having an interpreter available by telephone. If that's included in this, and if not, I'd like for it to be.
Yeah, so my understanding is currently Language Line is what we call it, medical, and looking at the cost of that, sometimes the cost of that is actually higher than being able to have in-house people. So my understanding is reviewing that, that is one of the ways that is currently available to principals. I believe they have to pay for those hours themselves.
So let me clarify. When I say have someone available by phone, they can be FCPS interpreters, because I think it would help them to be more available to more people as opposed to having to drive. So I'm familiar with the paid Language Line, which is expensive. But I'm wondering if we have considered setting up our own, which may help to reduce some of the cost.
Ms. Schultz, you had another question?
Yeah, just on this, I'm sorry, I thought this is why we made parent liaisons full-time. I thought this is, I mean, so this is what I don't understand. If we talk about doing this, we're not talking about what we've already done, what we've already built into the budget to cover some of these gaps. And so the goal has been in expanding the payment to other employee areas by bringing people on either more full-time or offering benefits, that we actually were closing the gap on these. And so if we do this, are we not effectively double dipping or not accounting for the budgetary motions that we've already made?
If I may respond. With respect, I certainly appreciate our parent liaisons having gone into a lot of schools, and these needs are extensive. From someone walking into the office to needed to speak to the teacher, to following up on a number of things, to IEP. So I can't imagine that a parent liaison can cover all the things that I know are necessary. And it depends on how many IEPs are evaluated. So I'm looking at this request as an overall evaluation of what is available and what is needed, which is information that I would very much like to have, with the adjustment that we can also look at having our own Language Line available as opposed to paying an outside person.
Okay, Ms. McLaughlin, then Ms. Evans, and then we really have to end.
Yeah, we're not going to be able to talk about this today. I apologize, but I just want to prepare everybody for Thursday, and I will follow up with Dr. Brabrand and Dr. Duran and Ms. Johnson. But I just read the more detailed language again to my follow-on number 4, and from staff, and it's very troubling. I got the board's approval of my follow-on motion in February. There's no more getting my having to put this follow-on motion a second time in May to have the board approve it again. I was very clear about what I wanted to ask about how we're using clinic aides versus school nurses, and the staff response in here is extremely problematic. I thought that the staff was simply saying it's going to take time to look at how we're using our clinic aides versus our school nurses, and that Dr. Duran brought forward a wonderful sort of initial approach to it, which is, here's what we could do about community schools for the fall. But if you read this detailed language in the response from staff, it completely ignores what the board already supported in February, which is for you guys to do this benchmarking and analysis with the county health department. So I just want to prepare you all that I'll try to visit with them between now and Thursday. We're going to need to get a lot more clarity, because you all, we've got it on video. You voted for my follow-on in February. This isn't to have you all vote on it again to give direction to staff. Regrettably, staff just didn't have time in 3 months to bring anything beyond saying, we'll try to get 2 community nurses. I also don't like the statement in here that when you read it some more, it's saying, even if we put this into the budget to convert 2 clinic aides to be school nurses, we'd still need the county health department to approve and decide on that. That is absolutely not acceptable either. We control our schools. If we want to make that clinic aide position a school nurse, it's not about the county health department saying, no, we're not going to give that to you. We're bringing the extra money to the table. So anyway, how it was presented the other day, which sounded wonderful, now this just sounds like a lot of like, well, if, then maybe, okay, possibly. And that's definitely not how I heard Dr. Duran present the other day. And it's one thing to get you all to agree for the extra $107,000, but this is like saying you might not even still execute on it, Dr. Brabrand, and I'm concerned.
Okay, Ms. Evans, you had one last word.
Just going back to the interpreters, I think this is a tremendous need at our schools. And indeed, the parent liaisons, we have 200 languages in our schools. The parent liaisons can interpret for all of those services. And quite frequently, we need to bring in, interpreters are a different employee. So just wanted to make that point that the parent liaisons can't interpret in 200 languages.
Okay, this part of the work session is done, and we will reconvene at 1:30. Okay, thank you all very much. Lunch.